Well, the reason you're all here is you are feeling the pain, I suspect, in terms of the realities that data is exploding. I know that you're probably well aware, but sometimes people forget how fast this movement has happened with the sheer explosion of data. But we're now at the point where by 2020, we're into the zettabytes of big data. And what that really means is that we probably have take the world knowledge, everything worldwide, and multiply that by another 10. And that's how fast the explosion is going. So the relevancy that we have for making decisions today is basically discounted in less than 30 days. And I mean that very sincerely. The buyers are upstream later. The coverage models are more complex. Many ways B2B sales in terms of direct marketing approaches are very, very difficult compared to what they used to be. And the more concerning fact is the human attention spans decreased by 50% since the advent of mobile. In other words, the human race, his ability to cognitively focus, much driven by mobile and the texting phenomena and the explosion of data, is down by 50%. Which is driving the whole movement for cognitive sciences as well as augmented intelligence. And now you would see like Elon Musk's new startup, which has pros and cons, but the Neuralink construct is really where there's possibilities to improve human performance with advanced analytics to cope. So way ahead of his time in many ways, but in many respects that's what's coming our way. So in terms of the dynamics here on the return of analytics, just getting back and going back a few years, the data science approaches, especially when you're using advanced analytics, can increase productivity of organizations by over 50% and increase their profitability by over 17%. There's no question in the time that I've learned in the last 3 years, having been a former partner of Accenture, a former leader at Xerox, a VP at Citicorp, that this phenomena, if we have more business people more knowledgeable rather than just pure IT people knowledgeable, we can start driving the pace for change that's really needed. Just to get another context, if you overlay predictive AI analytics on top of WAVE, you can start achieving ROIs of over 200 to 300%. If it's just a pure BI layer, likely your ROIs are less than 100%. And one of the main reasons is because you're looking in the rear view mirror, not forward. And the speed of the data explosion requires you to move forward. So I'm now going to turn this over to Rich to introduce more formally the spectrum of analytics.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah.
The term analytics is used to describe a variety of activity. So I always like doing a quick review just so we have a common framework of what analytics is. And I look at the spectrum of analytics covering these 3 major categories. So in the what happened category, this has historically been the major function of KPI dashboards. Key performance indicators tell a company what went on yesterday, last week, last fiscal period, and how it compared to previous periods over a variety of factors specific to that company. In the why did it happen stage, this is where we find the root cause behind the activities. And this used to be the domain of data scientists running specialized algorithms. But now dashboards have been moving quickly to help the standard business user to better understand the why behind the numbers. And in the what will happen category, this is where the area of predictive analytics that includes machine learning and artificial intelligence come in. In the Salesforce ecosystem, this is where Einstein is starting to be put to use, and where products such as IBM Watson and SalesChoice help companies make better decisions to predict the likely outcomes. So why we use the term dashboard throughout this webinar, it's used in the broad sense that spans that entire spectrum of analytics, from KPIs to root cause and even to predictive capabilities. And the what gets measured gets improved quote, that's one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it's from the late great Peter Drucker. So finding the best way to measure a business activity gives great power towards improving that activity to match the strategic goals of the company. So dashboards allow you to provide real-time information about a company's performance, make informed and goal-oriented decisions in the context that's relative to the audience. It allows you to have a single source of agreed upon information, so you have efficient and effective communications. And it identifies gaps and determines actions for improvement. And that's where the what gets measured gets improved comes into play here. And this is one of my pet peeves in the world, is that the term self-service analytics, it's really widely used today, and in my opinion, grossly overused. The promise by marketers of self-service analytics is for the users to select some analytics tools that they think best fit their needs, magically point those tools to a data source, and voila, instant dashboards. That's what we all hear, that's what we read about. But the reality is that self-service does not mean do it yourself. This would be like giving a bookkeeper access to QuickBooks and think that that makes them a CFO. No, it just makes them a bookkeeper that now has a tool that helps them do their job more efficiently with less mistakes. But it still takes that CFO to create the financial strategy for the company, determine what's appropriate to have on their chart of accounts, and understand the different levels of risk and authority to apply throughout the company. And similarly, in analytics, the dashboards require a data science mindset to determine the most appropriate use cases for the company. And it's unfair to give Tableau or Wave or ClickView to an administrator and think that learning the features of that tool makes them a data scientist. And this is a danger I see in a lot of companies right now. Now, most modern analytics tools still require specialized skills to customize and put into context for the business. Then once the tools are implemented, that's when the internal staff can be trained to manage and modify the dashboards without the reliance on the outside vendors. So that's when it becomes self-service analytics. Cindy, back to you.
Thanks, and I just want to reinforce that point. We're just currently, just to share a quick little story, unscripted here, we're just doing a fairly large deployment with some of our partners for a large company right now. And what we've learned through that journey is even asking the clients, and this is a pretty mid-sized, large global company, getting the clarity of what the folks in the analytics team can say in terms of what the KPIs are versus when we're talking to the senior executives, we're seeing knowledge gaps. So, again, it goes back to the point about really being careful about what use cases and the design constructs. I just want to echo that back. In terms of the power of Wave, there's lots of material on Wave at Sales Cloud, and pretty easy to get lots of videos and things. We've been working with the product for over 2 years now here and are now certified as well. And when we first got introduced to the Wave product, it wasn't that easy to use versus maybe Tableau, but I look at now Wave is absolutely on par with Tableau. The biggest differentiator for Wave, it's integrated with native Sales Cloud, which if you're in the Salesforce stack, it's good to be in the Salesforce stack, but also you get the collaborative enablement and the chatter enablement and the actionable insights to quickly clip something out immediately in the Salesforce environment and keep your data, that's a very important point, of communication in the Salesforce environment. So you can easily now find your insights. Mobile's got a very strong integration layer, and the platform has a lot of connectors as well for any data and any app. So, my vote would be if you are a Salesforce user, and it's not to say that we can't integrate on our side with Tableau and Rick's company as well, but if that's your entire architecture stack, you might want to think hard about making, the right architectural decisions. The other pieces I just want to highlight in terms of the Wave benefits. First and foremost, customers can increase their visibility to improve their performance. In terms of communication, what I see, but again, communication on these contracts is only good about who has the right authority, who has the right permission to see certain views. So thinking through relevancy and cascades for performance alignment is an area where sometimes we still see the change management efforts in those deployments. Things are still too technology-led rather than bringing in the right overlays for the right adoption. The second point I've mentioned, but I'll just reinforce, the ability to drill down and connect against any data set is certainly there, and obviously with Heroku databases where you can centralize all the data coming in from diverse stores, stores, I not mean physical, but in terms of storage of the data, can really help to then overlay Wave to pick and choose the right relationships. And the third, and to me this is the most important point, is the collaborative enablement. We've seen too many temples built with different visualization techniques or different structures, and to Rich's earlier point, the promise of that agility. Well, certainly agility is there for doing scenarios, and that's a good thing. But if your objective is to align an organizational culture with KPIs and have those drill downs logically to save your company time versus all these different spin outs, the Wave environment can certainly help because it does have the integrated collaborative overlays, chatter being one, but also when you're communicating and identifying source points, you can quickly circle it, annotate it, keep all that history in that specific account if you're account-based, so all those points. So just moving on to the next slide. I'm going to pass it back to Rich.
Great. And you're going to hear a lot of the same themes because Cindy and I are very much on the same page on those value props of Wave. The best dashboards don't just tell us what happened, but help you uncover new opportunities. So in the sales world, that means generating more revenue. And that would be a great definition of creating a killer dashboard that helps your company generate more revenue and reduce costs. So I believe the most important step on this chart is the first one. And similar to what we talked about before, it's what's the vision for this dashboard? Asking questions such as, how does that fit into my business strategy? Who will be relying on this information? When and where they have access, where do they have to access this information from? Do they need top-level takeaways, or they need to drill down to the account opportunity sales rep level? So those are the types of questions that should be asked about every element of every dashboard. And until you really drill down like that, you can't create a killer dashboard. So that's the first part of it is just creating what the vision is for the company on how these dashboards are going to be utilized. Then we can use the process of storyboarding and mock-ups to provide the working examples to the actual user to verify if it meets their needs or not. And then we get into the final design and layout to make it fit within the environment of the user. And this is where, again, as Cindy was just talking about, the power of Wave is that it stays in that Salesforce environment. Once we have that, then we move into the execution to bring the dashboards into production, but it doesn't even stop there. That's the point where the user training and admin training come into play and getting the feedback from the users and iterating to meet the specific needs. So it's that constant back and forth. And we look at the purpose of dashboards with this lens of asking, is it strategic in nature or is it operational in nature? So that's a first major branch that we take into consideration. And operational dashboards are reporting tools that use and are used to monitor business processes that frequently change throughout the day. Compared to other type of dashboards, the data updates very frequently, sometimes even minute by minute as the information is going in real time. Operational dashboards are designed to be viewed multiple times throughout the day, and they're often used to monitor progress towards a very specific goal. An example of an operational dashboard is a daily web overview dashboard, where it tracks hourly web performance against a predetermined objective for the digital marketing team, for instance. On strategic dashboards, they're reporting tools as well, and they're usually used to monitor the status of the key performance indicators and are typically used by executives. So the data behind the strategic dashboards will update on a recurring basis, but typically at a much less frequent interval than the operating dashboards do. Strategic dashboards may only be viewed once or twice a day, and they assist executives in staying on top of the KPIs throughout the business. So an example here of a strategic dashboard is the CEO Balance Scorecard, and it monitors KPIs across the organization using very simple data visualizations, and you can see it's either up or down, red, yellow, or green. It makes it pretty easy to understand what's going on throughout the business. Here are a couple of Wave dashboards with KPI drill downs, and they've been created for sales and for financials, and these are dashboards from recent deployments that we've had. both provide insight and SalesChoice have best practices and templates so we can support our clients to rapidly design and optimize their dashboards like you see here. Our unified approach is that, again, we're starting at that strategic level, determine what the executive team needs so they can measure progress against the company goals. Then we move throughout the company to make sure each function has dashboards to help them improve their results as it relates to the executive strategy. And too many companies are functionally siloed in how they look at the world. And having unified KPIs often require an external partner to help think through the entire scenario and integrate the dashboard views. I think that we also have here another set of operational dashboards, and this is highlighting some of the best practices for customer experience, such as conversion rates and customer satisfaction index. On the other one, it's for product performance, tracking sales by brands, by product categories, or sales by region. So getting clear on what you're measuring is critical before designing the visualizations. And I'll pass back to Cindy to take us through some predictive analytics use cases.
Great, thanks, Rich. We're going to cover off some three kind of perspectives enabled by the SalesChoice platform. And it's not to say that these same kinds of use cases couldn't be solved in different environments. It's just that we have built these out and proven that they work, and took 3 years to build and prove out they work. So that should say something. So the forecasting optimization is the first case I'll review in a couple minutes on the predictive analytics side. And the second is basically the actionable insights derived from AI and machine learning methods. And the third is more on the churn, predictive churn analytics side. So I'm going to go through a point of view on each of these perspectives. So in terms of the predictive analytics side, just to give you quick context, this essentially on our side, we're very specialized in sales outcomes and predicting the future for sales and marketing professionals. So the predictive analytics layer in Salesforce as an app exchange overlay, and we predict the sales outcomes, typically now up to 95% predictive accuracy in terms of saying which deals you will lose scientifically with high degrees of confidence. It's also a customized predictive model, unlike a lot of folks where they're taking just a subset of attributes. Our science is very deep. Obviously, we need volume as well for that. So I just wanted to make that point there. On the prescriptive analytics layer, just to say a couple of points, that's basically where you get the reasons for the insights on what's happening and also to be guided in what's happening. We're not here to pump too much product at you today. I just encourage you to have a demo. It's always helpful to get down to that level of understanding. The most important thing I've learned, and being a former Xerox executive, and I know we've got a lot of salespeople on the line, when I came into this journey to validate in my own mind, could we solve this problem? And the problem we wanted to solve was 30 to 60% of the middle tier sales professionals do not make their plans. And I've believed in my heart for many years it's not because of the people only, and yet every year we lob off the bottom performers. And it may be that those bottom performers have attention deficit issues and we don't even know, because 30% of sales professionals have attention deficit disorders. And we don't test for that and bringing them into our companies, but we have a lot of them. The two most frequent careers that have attention deficit are sales professionals and entrepreneurs. And there, I guess I've got a double dose. So, just joking. But my point there is the importance for focus is at an all-time high, and that was the problem we set out to solve. And I absolutely know that the prioritization of AI on, again, good quality data in sales infrastructure can absolutely guide people in real time to focus on the best wins versus chasing the duds. I see so many people wasting time because they're in overload. Just think about the cognitive reality of attention and the fact that human attention span is down to 8 seconds or less, so people get distracted. We'll just move to the next slide. On the forecasting use case, this just gives a little bit more context here. And here's a couple of screenshots that are within our application just very selectively. The forecasting side, all of this can be easily customized into views, but it's all native within in Salesforce, is where we aggregate scientifically, advising what we believe your full pipeline value is from an AI perspective, despite what native Salesforce will say. So you're getting that kind of insight, but across a very unique customized predictive model rather than a subset, and I highlight that because it's very easy to offer a predictive score against a black box. We're not a black box company, quite different in how we approach the science, very deep versus light. The second area here is that the visualizations, we've spent a lot of time with a lot of experts to get to this level of simplicity because of the sales psyche. They have limited attention span, so they all understand that an A is a good thing and an F is a bad thing. The biggest value in these sciences, from what I can see, is stopping to chase the duds, because when you get to levels of 99% accuracy in predicting losses, on all the D's and the F's, you can basically just stop. You may choose to go ahead if you want, if you feel you need more coverage, but scientifically, you will likely, in the span that you've spent, the 12 months or 18 months, the science will be more right than humans are. That we've proved out by analyzing 3 of the world's largest data sets. So consider us, I think, now an authority on that point. And anybody telling you that there's not value here, they're wrong, as long as you've got sufficient data depth. In terms of a churn side, we've only started to go into the churn analytics side very recently, and it's just because there's a lot of churn going on. Within the subscriber-based world, there's actually about a 30% churn rate. So on MRRs, and anybody doing a SaaS play, you may not be at that point, but the average industry churn rate's very high. So getting the detection early on diverse patterns, whether it's coming from patterns in your technicians' call activity, or whether it's patterns in potential activity in your sales accounts, where you can see no line of contact going on with those specific accounts, any reported issues on billing, etc. So we're seeing now a lot of interest doing customized predictive churn models against a predictive platform, and that could be whether you're using SalesChoice software or Watson or us, helping with Provide Instance think through the use cases. We've just learned a ton about how to solve these problems. We just finished doing one of the largest companies, I know I'm being vague, but if you saw these NDAs, you'd know why I'm being vague, in the publishing industry, and we were able to predict at about, I think it was 93% accuracy on the predictive churn risk. So now you can start pulling that insight in the predictive side into the BI dashboards. You have to ask yourself, what's of more value? Things that are showing history, and it looks like the lines are good, or science guiding you forward with the foresight that you can't see, because the loss of losing an account has such a cost to the business. So these sciences really can get more fine-tuned to actually start doing preventative strategies, because the science are saying unless you start to cover this account differently, your odds are that you're going to lose that particular account based on the dynamics that are happening. So over to you, Rich.
All right, thanks. And those use cases are so interesting because that's, like you said, people can't see the future, and science can really help us get there. So it's just a fascinating scenario, especially within sales and the service world. And that feeds perfectly into talking about the WAVE framework. So working within the Salesforce.com ecosystem, it really provides some great advantages for using WAVE versus third-party tools, which up until recently, you needed to use a ClickView or a Tableau to get the insights from your Salesforce information. Most importantly, being embedded in the ecosystem with WAVE is that you get clean access to all the data that's already natively used within the Salesforce environment. And this really flips a typical time of a data scientist managing data from 70% data wrangling to now less than 30%. And that in itself is a huge gain by staying within the ecosystem of Salesforce. And the Wave feature set has improved tremendously over this past year, where it now, and Cindy, you mentioned this before, you know, it has the core functionality that really only used to be found in those products like Tableau and QuickView. And I'm not bashing those products. We're big believers and users of those products for specific instances. But Wave now allows those customized dashboards on par with those other players. It's now integrated in the Salesforce environment, and it allows you to display the results in the proper context for each user. And so to me, the important part is the user doesn't have to leave their core Salesforce environment to get the information on their pipeline or the status of the customer service tickets. The dashboards are right there in the context as they're working on their accounts. And that is a huge benefit of the Wave framework. Additionally, we found that providing the key metrics in an executive overview, it's a great way to get the C-suite executives to consume Salesforce information, which means they now understand the value of Salesforce and are much more likely to support other Salesforce initiatives. So it's a great way to get that culture further deployed around that Salesforce system. And it's also important to give mention to the needs of importing data that can be worked on within Salesforce. So if you're starting up a brand new Salesforce implementation, or if you have a Salesforce implementation, you're bringing a brand new third-party source of data to be loaded into that Salesforce, it's important to go through the proper data cleansing and deduping process. You want to keep that Salesforce implementation accurate and thorough with the data. The nice part is the clean data that you go through that process of cleaning the legacy data, it can be fed back to the legacy systems, giving them a better foundation for other uses. So that whole process of ID resolution, it requires data science and analytics, specialized tools. We have our ID resolution tool, but there's others out there on the product or on the market. And so once you have this robust set of data, then the partners, such as Provide Insight and SalesChoice, we can use a variety of tools to run the advanced analytics. And you can see that on the right side here. And this is where machine learning comes into play for predictive analytics, and artificial intelligence can be applied to prescribe actions. So tools such as IBM Watson and SalesChoice, as Cindy just went through, they fit nicely in this segment, and it uses both information from Salesforce and or your outside legacy systems that are outside the Salesforce ecosystem. So that's important to do. And then finally, it's all coming back together in Wave. So whether it's the Wave dashboards built on the data native to Salesforce, or also taking the end results of advanced analytics, it can all be visualized in Wave, and again, contextually delivered to the user in the method that best meets their daily workflow, so the user doesn't even have to know that they're leaving that environment. So really powerful ecosystem built up around Salesforce. And I think that, you know, now we can go kind of into our summary of the value that we talked about on creating killer dashboards.
Thanks, Rich. So just going to conclude things, and then we'll move to the open Q&A. So there's sort of five, I like to call these the high 5 points. I think first and foremost, we've talked about visibility. An executive dashboard gives you that, and the insight. Again, we always link it back to a couple of, I think, really key points. First, if you're publicly traded, we look at the annual report in terms of what your shareholders measure you against. That's first important point. Start with that construct, then move down with the executive alignment piece, because what I often see sometimes is some of the executive dashboards aren't totally integrated to the financial reporting process, and that's why the CFO is so important in the design of these broader strategic KPIs. The second point is the the time savings that you can incur, and we talked, I think, a few times in terms of how much time executives or folks spend time running reports and quite frankly not necessarily getting the timeliness often, but more importantly maybe not the right depth of the root causal side and what the causals are that are correlating to that. You know, a trigger is one thing for early alert signal detection, but can we see the line of sight to actually drive down? So the operational dashboarding constructs are very important to align very, very carefully. The third point is, you know, and just to repeat Rich's comment earlier in terms of Peter Drucker, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, and can't underscore that point enough. The fourth point is really be clear about what you're trying to achieve and work towards, you know, the desired outcomes. You can actually measure success. And the fifth point is really the employee performance improvements. Is, you know, if you're going to spend the time doing these strategic KPIs and operational KPIs, how does that manifest down to the employee level so you can really get that tight cascade that's integrated. We still have lots of issues in you know, employee performance metrics where we articulate what the strategic goals are and put that into performance objectives, but the tight alignment of how I'm measured on a day-by-day basis, if you need to get to that granular level, and some organizations don't, but if that's your intent, you know, you really, these KPIs with the right dashboards and the drill downs can actually get you there. It's a lot of work, but once it's done, you really have an architecture that, you know, 360 kind of degree of the artifacts that are happening in your organization in real time. That's the game we're up against right now. The other factor is step back and honestly think about what things you really want to measure, the critical few, versus trying to get too much underway, and drive as much foresight as possible. Again, relevancy and of looking in the rearview mirror, although it gives a good baseline of insights, may not necessarily be where you should be focusing in the future.